Hello and welcome to Talking Europe. I'm Armin Georgian at the European Parliament in Brussels. A year ago, on February the 24th, the world woke up to what many had thought to be unthinkable. Russian troops pouring into Ukraine from different directions and missile strikes across the country. Having failed to obtain his security demands from the West, President Vladimir Putin launched what he still calls to this day a special military operation. Ukrainian diplomacy went into overdrive, and my guest today was one of the major players in all of that and remains a major player on the diplomatic scene. He's Vsevolod Chentsov. He's the Ukrainian ambassador to the European Union. Ambassador, thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you for inviting me.
What was your experience of those early hours of February the 24th, 2022?
Well, definitely first hours and first days we experienced great shock, like any Ukrainian and any European. And we try to do our best to mobilize support here in Brussels and to make sure that people understand what is going on.
Deep down, were you surprised, or did you have a feeling that it was going to be what it actually ended up being, given that the war in the Donbass had been going on for 8 years already?
Definitely from the rational point of view, nobody expected that Kremlin could go so far. Yes, we've been in war with Russia for last 9 years, and then that moment 8 years. So we knew pretty well what Russians are capable. But year after, I think we better understand why it happened. And the main reason, it's a degradation of the Russian state, of the Russian system, a lack of democratic control over the government, over institution. And as a result, you have one person taking a really crazy decision, having all his own country and the neighboring countries as a hostage of this situation.
Speaking of one person, so we had this week the State of the Nation address by Vladimir Putin. Two things that certainly stuck out for me. One, the resilience of the Russian economy, which actually the International Monetary Fund has more or less gone in that same direction, and also the military-industrial production of Russia, which is increasing. What's your feeling about the military advantage now? Do you feel that Russia has that military advantage now?
Russia, yes, it's still a big country with a big army, but Ukraine can fight back. And what we need more weapon. We need fast deliveries of tanks, ammunition. We are discussing jets. And we are capable to defend ourselves.
Is the joint procurement idea, is that a solution, or would it take too long, do you think?
I'm responsible for our relations with the EU. So what EU is going to do, and Mr. Borrell made it very clear, is to use what they have available to deliver fast, deliver now, to start working on the most effective procurement method or system, and then as a third element to boost industrial capacities in the EU.
On the sanctions, the 10th round, what are your expectations of that?
It is important that we hit Russian economy in a powerful way. It is important that new sectors, new products are included into the package. It is important that also personal sanctions are imposed on propagandists, on other people involved in occupation of Ukrainian cities, so-called pseudo-referenda, and so on and so forth. And what is also important that EU is working very seriously on sanction circumvention. So to make sure that, yes, there is a powerful new package, but also all previous package, they keep water and they're working. and Russia has less and less opportunities to procure, to get equipment through the third countries.
The whole relationship between Kyiv and Brussels has been transformed, obviously, during your tenure. And before the 24th of February, who would have thought that Ukraine would be given the status of a candidate to join the EU? But some in the EU have said this could take decades for Ukraine to actually reach the point of joining. How optimistic or pessimistic are you about the speed of all that?
Definitely, we want to keep high dynamics of this dialogue. And what we have achieved during 1 year is definitely unthinkable on normal EU standards. We have received the status of the candidate country. We started quite swift implementation of those 7 steps which were suggested by the European Commission and endorsed by the Council. And we have quite advanced on this way. So we are working hard to get positive assessment by the European Commission in spring, to get Council taking decision on the next step as soon as possible. But it's not only about the speed, it's about the quality of reforms, and we want to make it to make sure that Ukraine needs reforms. It's not that EU imposing reforms. We are not ticking the box. We understand that we need to complete justice system reform to make sure that anti-corruption bodies are functional, and to move forward with negotiations.
On the corruption issue, it's interesting to look at the Transparency International rankings, which, as you know, it publishes every year. And it's curious that Ukraine's position is pretty much the same as it was in 2018, according to those rankings. It's hovered around 32, 33 points. And in 2022, it was ranked alongside Angola, Zambia, and El Salvador. This is obviously a huge concern to people in the institutions here, isn't it?
Look, we need to remember that Ukraine is a country in war, which reformed itself during the war. And we are making quite a significant progress during those recent months. So, and I'm sure that this organization and other watchdogs, they will take into account this progress.
Do you feel, though, that at the end of the day, I know it's hard to predict, but can you imagine the EU accepting a country which is de facto divided? Not de jure, of course, but if the reality on the ground is that Ukraine can't control all of its territory, can you really see the EU saying, okay, that's fine, you can still join the European Union? We're talking further down the line.
We do not admit that Ukraine could be divided, that Russia can succeed. Ukrainian territorial integrity is not in question. So we are talking about Ukraine in its internationally recognized borders, and this is our very clear position.
On the question of frozen assets, there's obviously a distinction, and I think we have to explain this for our viewers, between freezing assets and seizing assets. To seize assets, criminality has to be proven. So what have you been working on in that regard when it comes to proving criminality on the question of private assets and state assets?
Well, the European Commission and other institutions are going quite intensively on criminalization of circumvention of sanctions. But you pointed rightly that we need also to look into the big important issue of state-owned assets. And there are definitely legal issues, and we need to find a solution how we overcome the legal obstacle which is called sovereign immunities. But our approach is quite clear. Russian Federation has committed international crime of aggression. And it cannot hide behind the state immunity. So it cannot pretend to be protected by the state immunities as a normal state. And we are working hard with EU and other partners to find those legal solutions. There is a connected issue, which is prosecution of crime of aggression.
This could be in an ad hoc tribunal is the current idea, right?
We are working on the special tribunal, which should be the most solid and broad solution with broad international support.
But do you, personally, I haven't spoken to a legal expert who believes seriously that high-ranking Russian political or military figures would one day actually be in the dock, because a special tribunal would not necessarily have that kind of international reach and would not have perhaps the prosecutorial powers that you might need and the ability to actually arrest somebody anywhere in the world.
So that's why we need as many as possible countries supporting this construction, this solution, to make it credible, legally credible, and then we can reach the goal. So
we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for being my guest on the program, Ambassador Chentsov, the Ukrainian ambassador to the European Union. And join me in a few minutes after the break. We'll be continuing our Talking Europe program dedicated to that first anniversary of the war. Do join me in a few minutes.